Hello, everyone. If people are joining as we're going along, that's fine. But I want to be sensitive to Kate and Chris's time, make sure that they have time to do their presentation. I'm actually here in Menominee at Milkweed with Kate Laird and Chris Hayden, right? And we are going to be talking about peer support in CCS. And Kate and Chris have been lovely enough to dedicate their time and donate some time to us to talk about this today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it over, and I'm going to let them take over for a little while, and hopefully everybody enjoys this. And if you have questions, I'll let them decide if they'll take questions as they're going or if they want questions at the end. So Kate and Chris, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Adam. I'm Kate. I'm the one talking right now, and then Chris is here with me as well, and we're both certified peer specialists, and we provide peer support through the peer support service array, as well as other supports in the CCS program, as well as also doing some administrative work for Milkweed Connections. So we put together a bit of a presentation for you. Uh-oh. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Oh, no, it won't go. We're having technical difficulties. Hang on one second.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we're going to talk about, what this presentation is going to be like. We will have time at the end for questions and answers, but if you have a burning question, go for it. So we'll start by providing a brief overview of what peer support is. That's a question that we get asked a lot, and there's not really any simple answers, but we'll try to give a brief definition. It tends to look different with everybody because each of our peer support providers is a different person. Then we'll talk a bit about the values of peer support, and then talk about the impact and a little bit about the research that's been done to show the effectiveness of peer support. And then we'll talk a bit about intentional peer support. That is there's numerous training programs for providing peer support, and this is the one that we feel we resonate with the most, and so we tend to incorporate that particular training into the training for our team members. And then we'll talk specifically about peer support in the CCS program, so looking at possible objectives and activities that peer supporter can work on with CCS participants. We're very proud to be able to offer peer support specifically for the LGBTQIA+ community, as well as family education. And then talk about the role of the certified peer specialist as part of the recovery team, and then talk a bit about who are good candidates for peer support. And then we'll open it up to questions and answers.
Okay, this is Chris. And for those of you who aren't seeing the PowerPoint, this is the first slide. What is peer support? Like a slide, technically. We've got the nice little unicorn picture on it. So peer support has, as Kate kind of alluded to, a number of different definitions. Generally speaking, peer support is mutual support provided by any two people who identify as peers, which is kind of self-defined, basically. And then in the context of clinical mental health services, it's professional service, of course, provided by a person who identifies as having lived experiences with challenges related to mental health, substance use, trauma, or other difficult experiences. So their life experience in combination with their professional peer training guides the practice. So that's kind of a specific section of peer support. I think that the first definition, that it's any two people who identify as peers, is really important, though, because the whole context of peer support is that the recipient of peer support at one time could be the deliverer at another time. Those roles could be switched, in an informal sense, obviously not in CCS necessarily, but I guess it could happen that way. So, in that regard, we have like this context of equality between the two people involved in it. So it's a little bit less of like a, one person has a big professional hat and the other person doesn't kind of environment that we work in. Couple ways that I like to define it personally. One being a good friend with boundaries. Someone who can, come over and support you, but also has that professional training that we talked about. It's also, in a sense, it's the art of being just present with someone. That's how I like to think of it most of the time. So in Wisconsin, of course, a peer supporter has specific training 6-day training that the state requires, and then there's an exam for licensure. So beyond that, we have continuing ed requirements, 20 hours every 2 years. And those could actually be in a variety of subjects, such as cultural humility, ethics and boundaries. It could be substance use specific or mental health specific, trauma informed, and peer specialist specific. So we have a little bit of ongoing training involved as well, and then we have our clinical supervision requirements as CCS providers. So we end up talking a lot about boundaries because peer support is a little bit of a murky field to work in professionally. And boundaries come up a lot because they're not probably as defined as they are in most CCS professions. And there's actually a little more flexibility there as well, which can be an advantage as well as, potentially pitfall in some cases. So that's an ongoing process. I would, as a peer supporter, that I like to, make sure people are aware of when they come onto our team.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
All right.
Okay, can you show me how you did that?
Oh, there we go.
There we go. So moving on to values. If you don't have the PowerPoint in front of you, there is a picture of a tree with a bunch of words that identify different values of peer support. A couple of them are the first one being authenticity and trust. And what this means to me is that when we as peer supporters show up to meet with the people that we're spending time with, we're coming into that arrangement and essentially that relationship with our authentic self. So we show up with our past, and being peer supporters, we have sometimes pretty colorful pasts, and a lot of times pasts that are similar in experiences to the people that we're spending time with. Whereas other professionals might probably not share as much about their past or their experiences or even their current experiences, we are bringing that with us to our work. We're using good judgment as we do that in the training that we've received, but we do bring that into our work. And that gives us, this authenticity, and that us showing up as our authentic selves creates a trusting relationship where hopefully the person that we're spending time with feels that they can also show up as their authentic self. We work towards having empathic and equal relationships. So our role isn't to assess or to fix people. We're there to kind of create a connection and an understanding that's based on sharing our worldviews and sharing what we've been through, and really working at exploring things together. We believe in recovery. We know this from our own experiences. We have on our team specifically and other peer support people who work with other organizations. We all have different backgrounds of mental health challenges, substance use challenges, traumas, other difficult life experiences, and we've each of us reached some point of recovery from those experiences, from all those things that may be labeled as disorders, and we're here showing up present and being a model that people can recover from these types of experiences. And so we hope to provide hope and dignity for the people that are going through these challenges. I think probably there isn't a single person in the world who hasn't been through many of the challenges that the people we work with have been through. And so we're just kind of putting it out there. We believe in lifelong learning and personal growth. None of us, as the same as any of you all, are perfect lifelong. We learn things, and we're always improving and growing, and we're always revisiting struggles and challenges and continuing that process. We strongly believe in self-determination. I think this is a huge value for a lot of us who have experience, especially with receiving mental health services and substance use services. We've come a long way in these fields of providing support that's person-centered and really led by the people who are receiving the services. And as being people who have previously or currently still received services, we understand that importance that when it comes from us, it's so much more meaningful and we're so much more invested. And so we carry that value into the work that we do and make sure that the people receiving our support are leading the process. We believe in social inclusion and respect for everybody. And we believe in, again, recovery and have a wellness focus when we're working with people. So we're more interested in talking about things and looking at things through the wellness scope.
Okay, and our next slide kind of details the impacts of peer support on people's lives and society in general. According to our source, the Center for Innovation and Peer Support has a wide variety of impacts in society, including reduction in medical symptoms, decreased substance use, development of coping interpersonal skills, empowerment and hope, improving daily functioning, quality of life, improving social functioning and quality of life, and fewer and shorter hospitalizations, reduced need for intensive mental health services, including reduced costs, of course, of those services, and increased satisfaction with treatment and better communication with care providers. And that last bit, I think, is really important in CCS sometimes, as the peer supporter kind of acts as a catalyst for the team and the relationship between the recipient and providers. I'm a big evidence geek myself, so when I looked at this slide at first, I was like, well, where is this coming from? Because, of course, anyone can tell you that studies tell that stuff, and we don't really know specifically what they're referring to, so I dug into the background of this a little bit, and I'd like to share that with you briefly. Kate's laughing, so she knows me. And a lot of this comes from a SAMHSA 2017 report detailing the value of peer support. In addition to these areas, they also listed reduced stigma and increased community engagement, which I think is so important for many of our peers in CCS, is getting back out there, doing the things they love to do, helping others, getting a job, participating in general. So as peer supporters, we get to stay evidence-based about our practice. The term emerging research comes up a lot. It's still in process, but there have been a couple of systematic reviews of over 12 randomized controlled trials showing that peer supporters do indeed, produce really, really good outcomes when they're employed as mental health staff that are at least equal to, and in some cases better than, traditional care. Just because I think we provide that, additional level of engagement with people, our self-disclosure, our use of our experiential knowledge in life, so-called street smarts in some cases, and that we form a relationship based on empathy from our own experiences. And some of the research has speculated that we also have pretty high expectations of people. We hold people in high regard, and we may demand more of them as well. So, we've been there. We know how hard it can be, and we know what it's going to take for people to get through it. And so I'm not trying to say at all that we're better than normal care, but that, adding peer support into someone's care could be a way to improve their outcomes.
I'm going to read this paragraph that's on the next slide that's written by Sherry Mead. Sherry Mead is one of the co-creators of intentional peer support. So most of our team members have gone through the Wisconsin Certified Peer Specialist training. Like Chris mentioned, that's a 6-day training. Some of our team members have not had an opportunity to attend that training, and so I am personally an intentional peer support trainer, and so I am able to provide some training to our team from this curriculum as well. And we just really align with the approach and the values from this particular curriculum. Intentional peer support is about conversation. It's about how we know, how we create new knowing through dialogue, and about how we as human beings interrelate by beginning to practice the art of connection with ourselves, the people in our lives, and the people on the planet we may think we have nothing in common with. For me, it is a practice that has no right or wrong. It is always in flux, much like improvisation in music. It is a process of experimentation and co-creation. It assumes that we play off each other and create ever more interesting and complex ways of understanding. We see it as a tool for keeping the world on its toes, becoming more comfortable with less predictability as we become less reactive to fear. In other words, it is not another practice that presumes to have the answers, but instead it aims to generate good questions. So a brief overview of intentional peer support. Intentional peer support has 3 principles and 4 tasks that guide the whole training. The training is actually a week long, so this is the micro version of the training. So the 3 principles, the first one is from helping to learning together. So this is trying to move away from this relationship where I, as a peer supporter, am helping somebody else to get better or do better or be better or any of those things. We're trying to move out of that helping role and more moving into a process of learning together so that the person that we're engaged with is also a co-creator of the process that we're going through. Moving from the focus from individual to relationship. So peer support isn't about me as a peer supporter helping this individual over here. It's more about what can we do with this relationship that we have together. And then the third principle is moving from fear to hope and possibility. And I think that's a big one that's really important to me when I think of just the model that we work with. We work with MA, we work with needing to have diagnoses and to needing to sort of fix problems. And so a lot of supports that are in the mental health and substance use field are about moving away from those problems and being fearful of those problems. And we try to shift the focus to having hope and possibility about what the future might look like. And then on to the 4 tasks. The first task is connection. And these are a little bit in order, like you should do this one before you do the next one, but not necessarily. This isn't like a step-by-step process that we sit down with a checklist and make sure we go through each one. But these are, in general, just things we flow in between and that are important in the work that we do. So the first task is connection, and that's the very core of peer support. We need to establish that connection before we can really get anything done, and I think people can probably relate to that sentiment, and this idea of connection is important in probably all of your work, that all of you do as well. The second task is worldview, and so we're wanting to explore with the people that we work with why they believe the things that they believe. What do they mean when they say that they feel anxious? What do they think is a good outcome? And so really getting a chance to understand where they're coming from and what they want. And then also sharing where we're coming from and what we want so that we're understanding each other really well. And with that ability to understand, we can communicate and create things together. The third task is mutuality, and this is at the core of peer support as well. Peer support is a co-learning and co-growing process. We don't presume to have all of the answers for people. We have some answers, and we also share the respect for the people we're engaged with, that they also have answers and that they also have things that we can maybe learn from them. And then the final task is moving towards, and I spoke a little bit about this in the last slide as well, but this idea of moving towards the things we want instead of away from what we don't want. You know, when I do different goals, I'm a very goal-oriented person in my work and in my personal life as well, and I know that when I sit down and think of things that in ways that I want my life to change or that I want my work to change, it's way more effective for me to think of what I want instead of like think of all the bad things that I need to stop doing. It makes the process more fun and joyful. It helps me be more engaged, and it also gives meaning to what I'm doing.
Okay. I just wanted to pause and check to see if there were any of those burning questions so far before we move on to the next section. Hopefully y'all are still out there. Okay. If not, we do have time at the end. So moving along to peer support in CCS specifically, we have a list of possible objectives and activities that can tie in with a person's goals and objectives in CCS. So they include learning social skills, of course, through building a relationship with their peers. So that's us building a relationship together, us maybe modeling in some senses what a healthy relationship can look like through drawing boundaries, especially communication, things of that nature. Also being open emotionally to them and talking about our experience and sharing and all that can really help with the relationship aspect. We seek to increase natural support by exploring social activities with their peer, things they might be afraid to do, they might want to do, but not really feel like they have the energy to do on their own. That's really a big part of what we do, getting out in the community, just having that, someone along with you to do a lot of your daily activities that maybe you haven't felt up to doing on your own. Learning how to identify healthy relationships through the relationship with the peer. We kind of touched on that already. Building confidence and expressing thoughts and feelings by interacting with a trusted peer. That word trust is important, of course, and a lot of what it means in the peer relationship to me is non-judgment. Just not trying to fix things when someone brings something up right away, not being reactive, asking open questions or reflections, giving them a chance just to express themselves without any kind of fear of reprisal or the thought that I'm going to go and tell on them for thinking bad things or whatever. So to me, that's a huge part of what I do. Increasing life satisfaction by exploring interests and hobbies with their peer. That could be something they had been interested in previously and kind of lost touch of. Maybe, their life went downhill and so they weren't able to do a lot of this stuff. And that ties into what Kate was talking about a lot, like thinking of the positives, thinking of the goals they have, what's meaningful to them. It's a strengths-based approach, definitely. So building a wellness toolbox is another way we can do things, exploring coping skills and wellness activities together. And they could be something that the person is already interested in or has done again. It could be something from the background of the peer supporter that the recipient of the service is interested in also looking at. Like a lot of my people like to do Tai Chi with me because that's part of my personal background, so we can do that. Or it could be something that neither of us has done, and then we're just on this adventure together, just exploring something totally new, which is fun because then it kind of puts us in the same boat together. And moving along to the rest of the list, building confidence in the community by going into the community with a trusted peer. So that's, again, going to all those activities, just being out in public, going to social gatherings, maybe participating in a more active sense. I like to think of this as, giving back a lot of the time, like what can people do for others. I think that's extremely important. Developing a person-centered crisis, or we like to call it a RAP plan, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, with the support of a person who has shared similar experiences. So some of us are at Milkweed are able to do that RAP specifically with people. Developing self-advocacy by exploring the person's wants and needs and taking steps to express those wants and needs with the support of the trusted peer. Sometimes people have not even really or don't feel like they have the self-efficacy to explore what they even want in life. When they describe things, it's all external events that happen to them or, just kind of an objective view of things, and they haven't really even been maybe given the permission for one reason or another to explore inwardly like what that all means to them and what do they really want and what do they need within CCS, and outside of CCS. So helping develop that is a big part of what we do. Developing goals and deciding on treatment options with the support of a person who's been there, sharing similar experiences. So, that in CCS, to me, it's a lot of times like, making sure they understand what their goals and their ISP are, what the objectives are, making sure, that they kind of have a say in what's happening. I know that CCS is all about that, so it dovetails really well with peer support. And we just kind of we sometimes check in with people and see like, hey, like, how is the whole program going for you? What's happening? just to get, give them a chance to maybe either express themselves freely without any kind of, outer consequences for that, or maybe they need some help advocating for themselves in a way that's effective and not, just confrontational. So that has become, to me, a really important part of what we do, especially the effective self-advocacy. So, moving along to the next slide. At Milkweed, we have a few peer supporters who specialize in LGBTQIA plus peer support. That alphabet is, of course, getting longer and longer, and we try to remain conversant and up to date on all aspects of that when possible. So in LGBTQIA plus support, the person receiving support has goals and objectives specifically related to gender, sexual identity, and I would add romantic identity to that as well. The person identifies in that community and wants support working on goals related to mental health and substance use, just like anybody else. That identity, as one of those letters or another letter that's not included there, includes a lot of things, and I don't expect you all out there to know everything about it. The T for transgender includes also non-binary people who don't identify strictly as male or female. The Q could be questioning or queer. The A could be allied or asexual. There are a lot of different, types, a lot of different colors in the rainbow there. And it's not entirely necessary for someone to identify as the exact type of LGBTQIA person to give support. It, of course, depends on what the recipient would like, as far as, do they want someone who identifies very closely with them or not. But a lot of us have had similar experiences, myself included, just of stigma, having to explain things to people all the time, stuff like that. So we have a great deal of commonality within that spectrum. And people want support developing independent living skills as well. A few of our members really specifically work on transition skills for transgender people. So those living skills also include their transition goals, which could be, going to a doctor for hormone therapy, getting support for name changes, birth certificate changes, stuff like that. That can be a big part of it. And these people often want and need support educating their family members, and I would say, healthcare providers on how best to support their health and wellness. It does get exhausting to be someone who's always explaining your marginalized status to somebody, and at the same time, it's difficult for every provider and every family member to understand every aspect of this kind of support. So we try to help, again, people with self-advocacy. Sometimes we step in a little bit and try to help with the educational piece. Kind of course, depending on what the person needs and what their goals are. So that's a big part of that. Again, our supporters, LGBT, identify as, some portion of that spectrum and might not need to be an exact fit, depending on the person. So this is an example of how, your social health and mental health can relate, and how, being part of a marginalized group or a misunderstood group can really affect your recovery specifically. And last on this, I would say our primary goal, with all these letters and different definitions and things, is really to help people develop their individual identity, explore that, express that, be themselves. Labels can be confining or they can be freeing depending on how you use them, and so we want to give people the chance to use them in a freeing way.
I'm going to add real briefly onto that while we have some people who specifically provide support for the LGBTQIA plus population and identify as members of that community themselves, we also make sure to train on our team everybody to be aware of some of the common challenges and gifts that people in this community face and have. All right, so we're getting to the end here. The next slide is peer specialists in the recovery team. So, what is our role here? The peer specialists is a paid professional. I know it can be, and some people take issue with this phrase of being a paid friend, but I actually think it's a fairly close description of what peer support is. But it's important for the team and for the service participants and everybody else involved to understand that we're a paid professional. So we aren't a friend. We're not there after the process of being in CCS is over. You know, we all have different degrees where some people keep in contact minimally, but we're a temporary paid professional in a person's life. The peer specialist doesn't replace any other provider. We may cross over sometimes with roles. A lot of times people may be talking with their therapist about some of the same things that they're talking with us about, but that doesn't mean that we replace the therapist or that we're a threat to the therapist. We're there as a complement, not a replacement. And then peer specialist services complement other services by adding our own unique and intrinsic benefits into the mix. The peer specialist is there to work as a member of the recovery team. So all of us really want to be part of recovery team meetings. We want to be part of helping develop goals and objectives. We want to have good relationships with the other providers on the team. We're open and receptive to feedback, and we're there to be with people.
Okay, so people who might make good candidates for peer support. It might be a good fit for people who actually want to and believe they would benefit from meeting with someone who's been through similar experiences. Of course, peer support, maybe possibly more than a lot of services out there, really depends on that, want and belief about doing it. Of course, it's true of, I think, most of the services in CCS as well. People who desire and are willing to engage in a relationship based on mutuality and shared power. In other words, they're looking for more of a partnership than a traditional service provider relationship. And again, that puts a lot of the burden on them to kind of carry their part of it. We believe that they can. So we do hold them to that. People who want to or could benefit from learning about recovery from someone who's had similar experiences. Not necessarily the same exactly, again, it kind of depends on the person's wants and needs. Like, do they need someone who's if they have a background using meth, do they want someone who has a meth background, or if they've been incarcerated, do they need that exact kind of thing? It kind of depends on the person. People who understand that good boundaries are essential to any effective relationship, including peer support relationships, or are willing to learn about good boundaries. I guess, I might add that, we know that a lot of people in the program have had trouble with boundaries in the past. Maybe other people haven't respected them, or they haven't had a chance to learn them. So that understanding doesn't mean that they're there already, and that's why we added that last little part, being willing to learn, about showing up, that kind of thing, what the peer relationship involves, and understanding that. It's all a really big part of what we do. Sometimes people who want support but are resistant to working with conventional providers might be more receptive to working with peer supporters. So that kind of depends, again, on the person. The evidence so far, again, suggests that the people who are kind of, I hate to use this phrase, but kind of considered tough cases in the normal world may be more benefited by peer support specifically. It just seems to be, so far, the evidence out there. And it just, again, depends on the person. We can sometimes be more open with them, and they might just have that level of trust sort of more built in at the beginning. And then hopefully that will, influence their relationship with the rest of the team eventually.
Well, that is the end of our presentation portion of this, and so we're going to open it up to questions.
Don't forget to unmute your line if you're trying to talk and nobody's talking back.
I think we have a text question.
Yes, we would be. So the question was, is if we can share the slides. And so if you email us, we're happy to send the PowerPoint alone. And otherwise, Adam, do you want to talk about?
Assuming everything technologically has gone the way we think it has, this session has been recorded, and so you'll see audio that goes along with the slides. That'll be posted to the CCS portal here as soon as I get everything processed and squared away.
And my email address is Kate, K-A-T-E, at milkweedconnections.com, or Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at milkweedconnections.com. If you email either of us, you can send them. You're welcome. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, feel free to also reach out individually if you have questions. We're very open to taking questions, and even if they seem kind of awkward, we get some awkward questions, and that's okay. We're good with awkward.
Mm-hmm. We live in awkward.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us and wanting to learn about peer support.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and just as a reminder, we'll have another one of these next month, the second Wednesday. We're still pinning down the topic, but feel free to join us again next month, second Wednesday at noon. Thanks, everybody.